2003 was a weird year for WWE. The roster, high on talent and big names, yielded shockingly few dream matches. Pay-per-views were weak. WrestleMania's buy rate was some 300,000 below expectations. Goldberg's WWE dream run turned into a nightmare, and the McMahons came back to TV, clogging up more time than ever before. But it wasn't all bad, particularly between the ropes, and there were plenty of backstage goings-on to keep fans entertained away from the ring. So let's take a look at some of the stories that flew under the radar in this weird, wacky year. I'm Andy for What Culture Wrestling, and here are 10 things you didn't know about WWE in 2003. Number 10. Eddie Guerrero snaps at a fan. 28th of September 2003. We're in Winnipeg, Canada, and the Bashin brothers are wrestling Los Guerreros in a house show when Eddie had a beer poured over him while he was selling near the barricade. He, quite understandably, lost it, hopping the barricade, chasing the fan in question, and he threw a few punches as well, but fortunately, none of them actually connected. Out came Jack Lanza and Arn Anderson to calm the thing down with a boatload of security in tow. Now, Eddie did apologise and he did finish the match, but he had more than a few words for the fans' friends who were sitting in the front row with their dumbass pal. Guerrero got away with it, but imagine the piss storm if those punches had connected. Number 9. Rodney Mack kicks the Hurricane's head in. Big Rodney was a real-life legitimate badass, as the Hurricane would find out backstage at a Knoxville, Tennessee house show in September, with the superhero laying out his idea for a match that would pit him and Rosie against Mack and Mark Henry. Mack jumped in with some ideas of his own. Hurricane disagreed, and this somehow led to a blazing argument in which Helms, for some reason, challenged Rodney to a fight. Of course, Mack accepted and proceeded to batter Hurricane like a deep-fried sausage, resulting in a slap on the wrist and a stern telling off from management for both. Maybe, just maybe, picking a fight with a 270-pound truck of a man wasn't the best idea. Number 8. The Return of Mortis. Chris Kanyon had a tough ride in WWE. Destroyed by Kane and The Undertaker early in the invasion, struck down by injury and relegated to Velocity and Dark matches by early 2003, he couldn't quite gain any headway, despite his ability and enthusiasm. On occasion, Kanyon would even dust off his old WCW Mortis costume for house show appearances. Now, some speculated that this would lead to Mortis coming back as a full-time TV character, but even though WWE Magazine ran a feature on him, this never happened. Instead, Chris K had to settle for a couple of house show losses to Matt Hardy. Who better than Kanyon? Well, not Mortis, apparently. Number 7. Test and Stacey in the Doghouse. WWE seemingly had big plans for Test and Stacey Keibler in 2003, with the big man given a decent push when paired with his real-life girlfriend. At one point, he was set to face Chris Jericho at No Way Out and would have also featured on the WrestleMania card, but him and Stacey were snowed in before the go-home Raw. They couldn't make it there, and after being warned to allow extra travel time and board an early flight by WWE, the feeling was that they should have left town a lot earlier, before their flights were even cancelled. The Jericho match and WrestleMania appearance were cancelled, and while the heat soon dissipated, it unquestionably cost Test and Stacey big in the short term. Number 6. Booker T was considering retirement. A 14-year veteran by 2003, Booker had been talking about retirement with those close to him for a while, with a desire to break into TV and film his primary motivator. In a June interview with British newspaper and all-round scumrag The Sun, Booker revealed that he had 6 months left on his contract, and when they were up, he was going to sign a 1-year extension and then be on his merry way. But, as we know, that's not how things planned out. Booker was with WWE until 2007 before moving on to TNA, but he was apparently serious about retiring at the time. Like many in wrestling, he saw that he had a lot more left in the tank and could still make money as an in-ring competitor, and in the end, he didn't properly retire until 2012. Number 5. Mark Jindrak was supposed to be in Evolution. It's hard to imagine anyone other than Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton and Batista as Evolution, but the Animal almost didn't make the cut, with Mark Jindrak the man WWE and Triple H originally wanted in the group. The game was trying to mentor both Orton and Jindrak, whom WWE had very high hopes for. But the unfortunate thing is, both guys were pretty immature at the time, and they even went as far as staging a pretend fight entirely for their own amusement at a bar after a house show. Incidents like this made WWE second-guess their commitment. They pressed ahead regardless, even shooting a Jindrak vignette with Evolution, but the chemistry just wasn't there. Jindrak didn't present like he belonged with such esteemed company. So out he went, and in came Batista. The rest, as the cliche goes, is history. Number 4, Vince gets weird with Sable at a house show. Declining house show attendances saw all manner of big WWE names working live events to boost ticket sales, including Vince himself. Stuck for things to do on said shows, he unfortunately reverted to type, deciding to make the audience feel really uncomfortable with his repulsive groping ways, the grotty old git. That August, a house show in Uniondale, New York saw Vince come out and just start making out with Sable. Then, for some reason, he decided to pull up her dress and plant a lip lock on her behind. Knowing this, it's perhaps surprising that when Sable departed the company the following years, she and the promotion went their separate ways on relatively good terms. But incidents like this were unfortunately typical for Vince during this era. Such things are never okay, of course, but there was genuine concern surrounding his increasingly erratic behavior at the time. Yet here we are, 16 years later, and he's still on his bollocks. Vince gonna Vince, eternally. Number 3, RVD Shoots on WWE. Rob Van Dam was not a happy bunny in 2003. He was over-reliable in the ring and someone fans wanted to see prosper, but WWE management just weren't convinced. Thus, RVD had to settle for the Intercontinental title when he felt he should have been a bigger star. So he decided to let rip on the company in a series of interviews that September. The first was an appearance on KSPN radio, during which Van Dam said he preferred working for ECW, calling the WWE locker room politically sensitive and hinting at the displeasure at the way he was being portrayed in his feud with Kane. His next interview on the No Holds Barred internet show saw him talk about how he was buried in a booking meeting, his frustration about missing out on a WrestleMania spot, and question whether the creative team even understood his character. Then, in one last dig, he said that if Triple H ever ran for governor of California, he wouldn't vote for him. It was unprecedented for a WWE employee to shoot so hard on the company at the time. As a fan, however, you could totally see where he was coming from. Though RVD continued to flounder for much of the next year. Number 2, WWE considered rehiring the Legion of Doom. LOD made a surprise WWE return on an episode of Raw in May, with Eric Bischoff accompanying them as mystery challengers for RVD and Kane's World Tag Team titles. Hawk and Animal got a monster pop, but unfortunately, the enthusiasm just didn't last. WWE were considering bringing the duo back at the time, but LOD ended up entering such a shoddy performance that all plans were immediately scrapped. WWE just weren't impressed at all. In particular, they were peeved at Hawk just totally no-selling a 5-star frog splash, and yeah, it all fell apart. Now, unfortunately, Hawk would pass away several months later. Animal eventually came back for a 2005 run with Heidenreich, and while the Legion of Doom remain one of the greatest tag teams of all time, they were a spent force by 2003. So, perhaps, the decision not to bring them back was a wise one. And number 1, Randy Savage wanted Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 20. By the time Hulk Hogan faced Vince McMahon at WrestleMania 18, the Macho Man had already been retired for 3 years. Perhaps seeing the Hulkster facing the boss on the grandest stage inspired Savage to consider coming out of retirement and challenging Hogan for himself, because by September, he'd started spreading the word that he wanted to face Hulk at Madison Square Garden in 2004 to headline WrestleMania 20. Of course, at the time, Savage and Hogan had some serious real-life heat, and this would later come to a head at a TNA event in late 2004. Randy would continually diss Hogan in interviews and even dedicated a track on his rap album to calling him out, urging Terry Bollea to be a man, Hogan! Anyway, this was all good and well and honestly quite hilarious, but Savage was dead-ass serious about the match. Unfortunately for him, nobody else was. WWE's VP of Talent Relations, Jim Ross, nixed the idea during an episode of the internet call-in show Bite This, saying that he wasn't at all interested in seeing the former Dream match. Odds are that some fans would have loved to watch whatever monstrosity would have unfolded at Mania 20, even if the bout itself wouldn't have been anything special on account of both men's age and declining physical conditions. Randy just really wanted one final big match in WWE, but due to underlying issues with Vince and the company, it just didn't happen. Instead, Savage's final match ended up being at TNA Turning Point 2004, where he teamed with AJ Styles and Jeff Hardy to face Jeff Jarrett, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall, which was, well, it was certainly a thing. So that's our list, but what do you guys think of the wacky wrestling world of 2003? And can you think of any other under-the-radar stories from that year? Let us know down in the comment section below. Once you've done that, don't forget to like, share and subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, then follow us on Twitter at WhatCultureWWE and myself at Andy H. Murray if you want to tell me how wrong I am. Bye!